I'd like to call this meeting, the October 15, 2020 meeting of the Peoria Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Welcome everybody attending tonight. Thank you, commissioners, for being here. I'd like to begin with an opening statement that we begin all meetings with. The Planning and Zoning Commission is composed of Peoria citizens who've been appointed by the City Council to serve on the commission as a civic responsibility without commission, or without compensation or commission. Our duty is to study and review planning and zoning issues within the city of Peoria. The commission holds public hearings or may conduct a study session on a topic. Decisions made by the commission on general plan amendments, rezonings, and text amendments are forwarded as written recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will consider the recommendation of the commission and make the final determination. The City Council may concur with the decision, modify it, overturn it, or remand it back to the commission for further consideration. For conditional use permit applications, the Planning and Zoning Commission will act as the determining body and may approve, deny, or continue the application. Any member of the public may appeal the decision of the commission to the City Council regarding a conditional use permit. The appeal must be submitted in writing to the Planning and Community Development Department within 15 calendar days of the date of the commission's decision. As Arizona and Peoria continue to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, tonight's meeting is being conducted using measures to protect the health and safety of the public while discussions, deliberations, and actions of the Planning and Zoning Commission remain transparent. To ensure the health and safety of those attending tonight's meeting, members of the public are required to wear facial coverings while inside City Council chambers. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting remotely can, of course, do so by viewing a live stream broadcast on Facebook at facebook.com/cityofpeoriaaz, as well as the digital Peoria channel on YouTube. The meeting is also broadcast on Cox Channel 11 and CenturyLink Channel 8509. Additionally, the posted agenda online invited citizens with comments or questions on any agenda item to submit those by 6 p.m. in advance of tonight's meeting. If you have comments or questions following tonight's meeting, you can submit those to the Planning Department by emailing planning@peoriaaz.gov. In the interest of maintaining a fair and efficient hearing, the Commission will adhere to the following steps during tonight's meeting. Each case will be called in the order in which it appears on the agenda, unless otherwise announced. Chair will open the case. City staff will then provide a brief report and recommendation. The applicant is then invited to give a presentation. Then the chair will read the submitted testimony provided by the public in advance of the meeting. After all the testimony has been taken, we will invite the applicant back up to provide any rebuttal or final statements. Finally, we will have commission discussion and decision. And that concludes our opening statement. And I want to mention, I know we have some folks who want to speak to some items who are attending tonight, and you will definitely be given your opportunity to do so as well. So we're going to begin tonight with a roll call. Commissioners, please indicate your presence after I call your name. Vice Chairman Jay Otluski.
Present.
Secretary Brian Patterson.
Present.
Commissioner Sean Hutchinson.
Present.
Commissioner Linda Grice.
Present.
Commissioner Clay Alsop.
Present.
Commissioner Tony Fighter.
Present.
And Chair is present. Everybody is here. Fantastic. Our first item of business is the consent agenda tonight. These are for items that are routine in nature, and we have one item on tonight's agenda. It's item 1C. And this is discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings held on September 17th, 2020 and October 1st, 2020. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments on the consent agenda item before us tonight? All right, hearing none. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Now let's vote on the motion to approve the consent agenda. Go ahead and cast your vote. Has everybody voted? Okay, will it not be displaying tonight? Everybody has to get it. All right, fantastic. And it passes unanimously. Thanks, everybody. All right, we're going to move on to our regular agenda next. We have 3 items before us tonight under new business. And we're going to begin with item 2R, Prescott at Park West, Planned Area Development. This is discussion of possible action on case Z19-09, a request to rezone approximately 5.4 acres of land at 8128 North 99th Avenue from intermediate commercial C2 to Planned Area Development, PAD, to allow a 95-unit townhome community. I believe Ms. Faustino will be presenting tonight. Go ahead and present your
Yes,
report,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, thank you. Members of the commission. This is a request by Taylor Earl of Earl and Curley on behalf of Porter Kyle Builders to rezone a 5.39-acre property located north of the northwest corner of 99th Avenue and Northern Avenue from intermediate commercial to planned area development. The proposed PAD would allow development of the site as a 95-unit, two-story multifamily community named Prescott at Park West. The subject site is currently undeveloped and consists of 3 separate parcels. Each one is approximately 1.8 acres. To the north is a single-family residence on 1.7 acres. To the south are 2 vacant parcels and a city pump station. To the east is the mixed-use development Park West, and to the west of the property is North River. The proposed development will be a gated rental community with a density of 17.6 dwelling units per acre. The layout consists of 3, 4, and 5-unit buildings, offering 1, 2, and 3-bedroom options. Each unit will have a 2-car garage on the ground floor. 10 guest parking spaces are required, and 17 are proposed throughout the site, along with 8 additional parking spaces in front of the leasing office. Currently, the site is proposing a surplus of 30 parking spaces per the zoning ordinance parking standards for multifamily. Private amenity space will vary by unit, but all 95 units will have a balcony ranging from 72 square feet to 128 square feet. 28 units will have a 75 square foot patio, and 88 units will have a private backyard with artificial turf, a doggy door, a tree, and a barbecue area ranging from 192 square feet to 550 square feet. The Prescott at Park West PAD states management will be responsible for the maintenance of the private yards, not the renters. The proposed development standards are similar to the multifamily residential zoning district, RM1. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just clicking away at buttons. I apologize. The proposed development standards are similar to the multifamily residential zoning district, RM1, with the exception of the side yard, which has been reduced from 20 feet to 15 feet. The neighbor to the north has given written support of the proposed development with the current layout. The applicant has mitigated concerns by adding additional landscaping to the 15-foot buffer, along with positioning the buildings perpendicular along the northern boundary to minimize the amount of windows facing north. The building heights range from 28 feet to 30 feet, which is substantially lower than the 48 feet allowed, and the lot coverage is at 40%, which is 10% lower than what is permitted. For a development this size, the design review manual requires 3 amenities. Prescott at Park West has 7. They have a dog park, a playground, a pool, an outdoor kitchen, a gym, a splash pad, and a clubhouse. All of the amenities are connected by an illuminated 19 to 20-foot wide landscaped corridor with a pathway that runs north and south through the center of the community, which is a unique pedestrian amenity in the open space that we don't often see in projects in the city. The dog park, playground, and landscape corridor all have benches, shade trees, and lighting. The City of Peoria's design review manual requires common and private open space for multifamily developments. In an effort to create a rental community with an abundance of both types, Prescott at Park West has provided alternative open space formulas in comparison to the standards identified in the design review manual. As shown here, the design review manual, or DRM, requires 150 square feet of common usable open space per bedroom, and the PAD standard is 140 square feet, which results in a 6.7% decrease. With 182 proposed bedrooms, that would be a reduction of 1,820 square feet of common usable open space per bedroom, with the 1,820 square feet of common usable open space, which is more than compensated for with the trade-off of increased private open space. The design review manual requires 113 square feet of private open space per unit, and the PAD seeks to increase that minimum to 147 square feet. On average, each unit will have 400 square feet of private open space, which results in 254% increase. With 95 units, that would be an increase of approximately 27,265 square feet of private open space. With the site plan currently in review for Prescott at Park West, they are providing an additional square footage above the proposed PAD standards for both the common and the private open space, resulting in an overall increase of open space by 28,798 square feet. Pedestrian connectivity is a prominent feature throughout Park West. Therefore, Prescott at Park West has focused heavily on carrying that theme throughout the development by using a network of sidewalks as shown here. The main drive aisle entering the community will contain a 10-foot wide pedestrian walkway with detached planters, additional trees, and seating areas. The 8-foot sidewalk areas will have the same enhancements, and all of these walkways will be connected by the landscape buffer corridor running north and south throughout the middle of the development. To further encourage the relationship between the proposed development and Park West, a high-intensity activated crosswalk, or HOC, will be used to guide the residents safely across 99th Avenue. Vehicular access will come from 99th Avenue and will be full access. A deceleration lane will be required on 99th Avenue coming into the development, which allows for one lane in. When exiting the site, there will be a left turn only lane and a through lane that also allows right turns. There is sufficient turnaround area before the gate to ensure vehicles do not back out of the site onto 99th Avenue. And the driveway from 99th Avenue does align with Park West, which allows for the same movements, and a stop sign will be used as a traffic signal is not warranted at this time. The community is being designed with an enhanced modern architectural style that will complement the architectural vernacular of Park West. The entry feature sets the tone upon arrival with an oversized overhang trellis, a monument sign, landscaping planters, and decorative lighting. The symbiotic relationship with Park West is illustrated through the use of vertical trellises, similar blue-gray accent colors, the use of metal and wood, varying building heights, and pop-outs that create a strong building mass. The architecture in conjunction with the landscaping and the pedestrian connectivity creates an experience similar to that of Park West Main Street concept. The general plan designates the subject property and all surrounding property, which includes Park West, as mixed-use Main Street. The land use is intended for a unique blend of housing, shopping, and entertainment uses that serve as the social and commercial hub for the surrounding neighborhoods. The focus of this land use is internal and external connectivity, creating a walkable urban environment, targeting residential densities of 12 to 20 dwelling units per acre, and providing contextual sensitive architecture built to suit the scale of the surrounding area. Prescott at Park West works in conjunction with Park West to achieve the intent of the mixed-use Main Street land use category through the symbiotic relationship of design and accessibility. In terms of zoning, the PAD zoning district is intended to provide an alternative to conventional zoning and development so long as specific goals are achieved, such as encouraging innovative development so that greater opportunities for housing, recreation, and employment may extend to the city's citizens, encourage a more creative approach in the utilization of land in order to accomplish a more efficient and desirable development, and to provide a compatible and stable development in harmony with the surrounding area. The proposed Prescott at Park West PAD achieves these goals and the goals and objectives set forth in the general plan by further diversifying the city's housing options, architectural style, and providing a use that transitions well with the surrounding area. Noticing was completed as outlined in the zoning ordinance and as stated here. A neighborhood meeting was held by the applicant with 3 citizens in attendance. The main comments focused on the price points of the units, the building heights, and the time frame of completion. The city has not received any correspondence in opposition or support of this project. The key findings in this case have been met. The proposed PAD is in conformance with the goals and policies of the general plan. The proposal provides enhanced open space and amenity requirements. Staff asks that this commission recommend approval to the City Council for case Z1909, subject to the conditions in the staff report. Staff and the applicant are available for any questions.
Great, thank you for that report. Do any commissioners have any questions regarding the report you just heard of staff? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is the applicant present tonight for this project?
Yes, yes.
Oh, perfect. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. For your record, my name is Taylor Earl with the law firm of Earl and Curley. Our address is 3101 North Central Avenue. So I really appreciate Jennifer did a great job really walking through. Let me just make a couple of highlights and then I'll just be available for any questions. Go to the next slide. So I just want to highlight why it's so important, and Jennifer used the word that I would use too, symbiotic. That's really what we're trying to achieve here with Park West. Park West is really a special shopping center in the West Valley, and we want to make sure that it stays that way. There's some vacancies right now, and by bringing in what we're bringing in, it's not just more people, but also by bringing in something of a luxury level, we're able to bring in a little more disposable income, which we hope helps support keeping Park West at that higher shopping level, which is what we hope to provide. In turn, we believe that we can bring a high-end product here because we're next to Park West and because we're next to the freeway. So we think we're able to get higher rent rates, which is why you see that increased architecture. It's sometimes the case. I think we all want to see everything be nice, but there is some realities that get played into products that are designed for a little bit different market. We believe we can enhance the architecture, put in all the common space that you saw with all the high-end amenities, and that we can in fact get that rent rate wise because of where we're located and because of that symbiotic relationship. What was really important, if we can go to the next slide, as we work with staff, that hawk was really an important element of this, because it's one thing to be next to it geographically, but if you can't really highly connect them, then you're not getting the full symbiotic relationship. And so we've worked with staff on that. We're really excited about being able to bring that in. This slide here shows you that connectivity. So as Jennifer mentioned, making sure that we know that Park West, one of its key elements is come, shop, walk around, right? Don't just park in front, go to the shop and leave, come and traverse. And that's what we wanted to bring here so that there's interconnectivity. So you see in the green, that's that sidewalk system. And right up the middle is that 20-foot paseo, and we have affectionately called that Festino Way, because during the process, Jennifer was good to note that that was a possibility, and we did have to kind of move things around a little bit, but we think it made it a much better project to not only have a unique feature, but to make it really easy to get from the entry all the way down if your unit is there on the south. Next slide. Go ahead, you can click through these. Great. And so as I mentioned, these are some slides to show you what that experience feels like. So I mentioned how we have the connectivity, but then what does it feel like? And that's something that Park West has done very well. And so we wanted to have something with an equally attractive feature, right? So you have the space, but you have beautiful architecture and well-placed landscaping. Go to the next slide. And then we have some spaces to put in benches underneath shade so that there'll be a nice feel as you walk around. Go ahead. Secondly, just wanted to highlight a little bit on the architecture. Our architect, we have an in-house architect at Porter Kyle, did a really nice job. So taking a look at the redesign that happened to Park West, take a look at some of the use of the white, but also the use of the trellis as it comes off that cable system. It's a really unique modern architecture. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see how we have taken some of those elements. It's not copycat, but it definitely complements and calls out to the Park West architecture so that you can see that relationship between the two. This is what you would see off 99th Avenue. So this will be a great feature, or a great visual along 99th. And as we look to develop the west side of 99th, what we hope we are doing is setting a high mark for this is the type of architecture and quality of design that we want to see on this side. And then hopefully we set that mark for future development as they come in and look at what's already there. So next slide. And again, this is what Jennifer had pointed out as well. Go ahead. You can click through these. I think Jennifer covered it. This is, I'll go back one. So that's just a little bit of a feature of the pool, kind of a nice amenity there with some of the lounge area, and there's also an outdoor kitchen attached to that as well. Go ahead. Go ahead and click through that one. And I think Jennifer touched on this, just some of the massive amounts of common area in addition to all the private open space. Go ahead. And so that's, like I said, just wanted to highlight a few things, but I really think that this is the right development in the right location, and so we think it's a great fit, and we would ask for your approval.
Great, thank you very much. Before you sit down, do any commissioners have any questions of the applicant? See none, and I would, oh, Sorry, one just popped up. Commissioner Fighter, you have a question?
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Taylor. Will there be any provisions made for future sale of these units, or is it strictly being designed as multifamily for lease product? Will there be platting for future sales, metering utilities for future sales, or is that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I just want to check with the client to make sure, no, but it is not. So it would be designed as maintaining, we would be building it and then managing it moving forward, but there's not a thought now that we would turn it into for sale product.
Okay.
I assume you're in agreement with the conditions of approval outlined in the staff's report?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Ernst, have we received any speaker request forms on this? No? Okay, unless you have anything to add, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, since we have no requests to speak on this from the public, I'm going to close the public hearing. Any further questions or comments from commissioners on case Z19-09 before I request a motion? Commissioner Alsop.
Mr. Chair, I motion that we recommend approval of case Z19-09 to City Council, subject to conditions approval.
All right, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to recommend approval of case Z19-08. Commissioners, please vote. And the recommendation for approval passes unanimously. All right, very good. We're going to move on next to item 3R, Thunderbird West Estates Planned Area Development Amendment. Discussion and possible action on case Z97-10A.2 to amend the Thunderbird West Estates Planned Area Development pertaining to permitted land uses for parcel 3, which is approximately 3 acres, located south and west of 75th Avenue in Thunderbird. I believe Mr. Gleason will be presenting the report tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the commission. Particularly thank you to Chairman Outluski. It's been great getting to present to you. It's been quite a while, but good luck in your future endeavors. The case you have before you tonight is Thunderbird Estates West. This is a planned area development to an existing PAD, largely already built out. Again, this is case number Z9710A.2. The applicant in this case is John Gerdus with Texas Land Engineers. The address of the subject site, and I'll give you a little bit more detail, is 7685 West Thunderbird. However, this PAD amendment impacts not only the site that you see there, but also the commercial existing bank that's immediately to the east. So it's an amendment to parcel 3, and those are the 2 properties that are encompassed within quote-unquote parcel 3 of the PAD. So that's the reason for the 2 acreages that you see there. Really, the applicant is looking to develop the vacant site, but it's an amendment to those 2 pads. The proposed amendment is for the purpose of allowing a drive-through restaurant on the subject site, again, for that vacant piece, but it would include both parcels. And that amendment encompasses additional special limitations for the proposed drive-through use at this site. So we'll have some graphics on here regarding the proposed site plan, but again, this is a modification for the use rather than the actual specifics of the site plan. So we'll give some additional information as we go through. So immediately to the south is a continuation of the Thunderbird Estates West planned area development. This planned area development encompasses not only the commercial shopping center that the subject site is a part of, but also the single-family residential that's immediately to the south. So that's all a part of this one larger Thunderbird Estates West PAD. Within that PAD, obviously it allows for single-family residential for that southern portion, but within the commercial areas, it identifies specific designations as to the uses and development standards for the commercial portion. So as I referenced again, parcel 3 is the one in question here. Those use listings specifically refer to the O1 or office commercial zoning district. And the remainder of the site outside of those two pads refers to the C2 or intermediate commercial zoning district. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we continue on, but that is kind of the crux of the matter, is a modification to accommodate the drive-through use within what is otherwise specifically called out for O1 uses. The reason for the change is O1 does not accommodate a drive-through restaurant use. So they're looking to incorporate that within the PAD with use limitations that would account for placement of the use, noise emitted from the use, lighting, and any odor that may be emitted from the use. Here you have a conceptual site plan. Again, this this is not a formal submittal yet. We are awaiting formal submittal of the site plan from the applicant, but this gives a representation of what is intended to be developed on the site in alignment with the proposed PAD amendment. So the layout that you see here provides specific distance separation from the single-family residential to the south. That would account for anything from building to drive aisle. So that's rather unique in what you see in setbacks. Usually the setback is either identifying a minimum landscape width or identifying a building setback. In this case, that setback would require nothing other than landscaping occupy that first 75 feet that bounds the southern border of this site. Additionally, as a part of those special limitations, the applicant would have to orient the speaker box so that it is perpendicular to the residential to the south, basically angling it so that there's no noise projecting immediately to the south, so that hopefully that noise is directed away and dissipates and does not reach the residential homes to the south. Additionally, there would be automated decibel adjustment to ambient noise within the speaker box. So that can accommodate at quieter times, the speaker box volume would automatically adjust lower. Additionally, when it's noisier out, there would also be decibel level maximums that would be programmed within the speaker box to ensure that it's not emitting decibel levels that are beyond those allowed by the city code. So again, just trying to limit the context impacts to the surrounding property owners. As far as lighting, the proposed limitations more or less reinforce what is identified within the city code, providing for shielding and limited lighting at the rear of the property so that on the drivable portions there is safe maneuverability, but at the same time there's no light trespass that continues on to the residential homes to the south. So that lighting would either be shielded and or directed away from those homes so that sufficient lighting's on site but not continuing on to the homes. In an effort to address odor for the subject site, the hood system for the facility would include more or less an odor scrubber in an effort to minimize any odor emissions that you often see with drive-through facilities and or fast food restaurants, whether that's through a fryer or grill, just trying to keep that impact on surrounding property owners down. So what you see here is, again, just a representation based off the conceptual site plan that the applicant has at this time. The provisions within the PAD use limitations provide for a minimum of 75 feet from the property line with the residential homes. The proposed site plan at this time would accommodate approximately 87 feet before you get to a drive aisle or any real component of the use other than landscaping. So you'll see a couple different colored graphics on here, and bear with me since I'm colorblind, so hopefully I get it right. On here you'll see three hopefully orange transparent images. Those are other drive-through facilities within the commercial center. They are not restaurants. They are actually 3 drive-through banks. So again, immediately to the east is that bank use that's a part of parcel 3. So that is a drive-through. Continuing on east, you have 2 more drive-through bank uses along with the one at the corner there. The items in yellow are drive-through restaurant facilities. So if any of you are currently familiar with this area, there is a Taco Bell on Thunderbird currently, which you see there in yellow. The reason for the request is a corporate decision that's been made by the Taco Bell company and been conveyed to the applicant, identifying a need to split the combined Taco Bell KFCs. So in this case, the applicant is having to pull that Taco Bell out of the KFC, and because he finds this area desirable as far as demographics and service need, he identified the current vacant pad as a potential option for placing the new Taco Bell. So there wouldn't be 2 Taco Bells on Thunderbird. This would be basically the Taco Bell that is a part of KFC splitting off and becoming its own separate restaurant use. Again, we kind of touched on the limitations that are identified within the PAD, but as proposed, that buffer would exceed the proposed 75-foot requirement from the residential to the south. Again, a hood system to accommodate odor reduction for the restaurant, lighting direction away from the residential, and then speaker control volumes for the speaker box in an attempt to limit any noise impact that would be generated from the site. The remainder of the development standards within this PAD directs the user to the C2 or intermediate commercial zoning district. So in that regard, other than the special limitations that have been identified within the proposed PAD, it would look back to the C2 zoning standards for things like the setback, the height of the building, landscaping requirements, parking requirements, all those sorts of things that aren't touched on in the PAD have a reference point back within the zoning ordinance. The access to Thunderbird would not be increased with the proposed use. This would be using a shared driveway with the pad that exists to the east, so that UMB Bank currently has the driveway that would be shared with this proposed Taco Bell location. Here you see, and I apologize for the mislabel, the general plan designation on the left and the zoning map on the right. As you can see, the entire commercial center, with the exception of the daycare use, is identified as commercial within the general plan. That designation within the general plan really points to C2 and greater uses. And in this case, the allowance for a drive-through restaurant would be allowed with a conditional use permit in C2. So zoning hearing is functioning much like a conditional use permit hearing would in this case. As you can see to the right there, the zoning for the Thunderbird Estates West continues south to the residential, and then the church to the west contains a residential zoning designation as well. This particular application conducted 2 meetings. One functioned more as an introductory meeting for any neighborhood residents to attend and about the application. The second meeting functioned as the formal requirement for neighborhood meeting. So 2 meetings on this, both of which just due to worldwide circumstances were conducted via Zoom meeting. We had 2 citizen attendees at the introductory meeting. Comments from those citizens focused on things like noise mitigation, nuisance activity within the area to the south of the proposed use within what would be the landscaping area. Tree species, particularly as some species were identified during that meeting as potential nuisance with their growth activity and a desire, if there's trees planted back there, that it not be of that particular variety. And then site configuration, privacy, and noise. So in an effort to try and address those concerns, those were the reasons for the limitations added to the PAD to try and mitigate any potential impacts. Within the second meeting, or the formal neighborhood meeting, there was 1 citizen attendee. It was one of the individuals that had attended the first meeting. They had identified appreciation for the consideration of the changes that were made to the site, but still identified that they would prefer not to have the use adjacent to their home. As always, notification was conducted in accordance with the zoning ordinance requirements. A notification postcard was sent to all property owners within 600 feet and all HOAs within 1 mile, as well as a legal ad posted in the paper, and a sign was posted in accordance with our requirements on the subject site. Staff has received 3 letters of opposition at the time that the presentation was put together. I did hand out prior to this meeting an additional letter that was received yesterday. So you should have that in addition to the items that were in your packet. The focus of the concerns within those letters of opposition were potential light emission for the properties to the south, noise emissions, proximity to the residential, odor, and traffic. I will note that 1 of the 3 letters of opposition was from a property to the north across Thunderbird, and 2 were immediately to the south of the subject property. Staff did receive 1 letter of support. That letter came from the commercial property owner to the northeast. So if you're familiar with it, is the Bashas Shopping Center. As a result, staff finds that the PAD is in conformance with the goals and objectives of the general plan. It's in alignment with the remainder of the PAD as far as the intended development standards. And in addition, it would result in a context-sensitive development with the surrounding properties. As a result, staff recommends approval of case Z9710A.2, subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit 1 outlined in your staff report. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Great, thank you for your report. Appreciate that. Any commissioners have any questions of staff? Now's the time to chime in. I know we have a question from Commissioner Alsop. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had several questions. Maybe some of them would be better answered by the applicant, but I'll go through them here. The what did you call it? The hood system that filters out odors, is that what's standard, or is that above and beyond what's usually done in fast food restaurants?
Chairman, Commissioner Alsop, it was as a result of talking with the applicant, but I would probably defer to them as to whether or not there is some sort of typical standard that's incorporated within the hood systems.
Okay, my concern, if I lived immediately south of that, I would have reservations primarily about the smell. Sometimes I can smell those restaurants quite a ways off from being, let alone being the neighbor. So yeah, I would like to hear what the applicant has to say about that. Is the Taco Bell, I don't know if I'm getting the correct terms, is it a franchise owned by the company? Is it privately owned by a person?
Chairman, Commissioner Alsop, I would defer to the applicant, but my understanding is it is a franchise owned by a separate entity other than Taco Bell corporate.
Okay. And the bank, this affects the bank's PAD. Is the bank, did they have to sign off on this? Are they aware and in agreement with any changes that may affect them?
Chairman, Commissioner Alsop, we do send notice to all property owners, so that does include any commercial property owners. In this case, we haven't received any sort of communication from any commercial property owner other than the bashes identifying their support.
Thank you. I'll hopefully hear from the applicant then. Thank you.
No further questions. I have a couple of questions. Is this going to be a 24/7 restaurant?
Chairman,
Or
Commissioner.
any days of the week when there are 24 hours a day?
Sure. Chairman, I would defer to the applicant. Typically, and my understanding is the existing restaurant is 24 hours. I don't know if that's intended for this restaurant as
Okay,
well.
I'll ask the applicant of that question. This one, hopefully you can help with. In your research, the O1 zoning, can I assume that that was in place before the housing development was built?
So, Chairman, that was in place at the time of entitlement that included the housing to the south. So,
So these homeowners who bought their houses bordering this property, that O1 would have been in place at that time?
that's correct. And it's in place to this day. The proposed change would be to modify that to allow a drive-through restaurant. There would be no other use modifications proposed with this proposal.
Okay, I had seen some of the letters that some homeowners had indicated that they were told in advance that this would be O1 zoning off, there would be no restaurants there. So I certainly can appreciate that concern based on what you're saying.
And just a point of clarification, Chairman, I believe restaurants are permitted within O1. The distinction here is the drive-through component.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that distinction. I wasn't aware of that. Appreciate that. Okay, that's, I'll save my other question for the applicant. Okay, last call. Any further questions from staff? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at this point. Is the applicant present? Would you like to speak, sir? Perfect. If you can come on up. And actually, I believe I have a speaker request form. Are you Mr. Muckerman?
I am, and thank you very much.
Perfect. All right.
My name is Jeff Muckerman at 2048 North 37th Place, Phoenix, Arizona, 85008. I am representing Star Investments. They are a franchisee of Taco Bell. Unfortunately, the project's main engineer, who's based in Texas, has been exposed to someone with COVID and is in a 10-day isolation hold. He wished he could be here, and so I'm here in his presence. And with that, Commissioners, thank you for your time and your service, and thank you for your approval, consideration of Z97-10A.2. A special note of appreciation to Mr. Gleason, as his staff report spoke of the project in pretty succinct terms, and I'm not going to delve too deeply into that. I'm personally grateful to have been involved in both of the neighborhood presentations and participation meetings, and I certainly always appreciate meeting neighbors and engaging and learning what's important to them. With that, most of the changes that were made are a direct result of the neighborhood meetings, and we're real proud of the enhanced landscape that we've proposed. Mr. Gleason did share our site plan, and I won't go too much into that, but I did want to share the depth of the landscaping involved with what we're attempting. So here's to the south, and here's where the 75-foot buffer's going to be required. We came up with 87 and developed a palette of plantings that serves quite a few purposes. One of them was we heard from neighbors that certain species of trees will upend their block wall, causing thousands of dollars worth. Certain species of trees will break easily and fall into their yard. So we worked so closely hand in hand with the community in our efforts to make this, I think, something we're real proud of. To the question of the neighbor and the bank, we had direct communications with them in that we efforted to remove some of the bad species trees on their side to make this look more cohesive, and we couldn't get a reply back from them either way. But additionally to that, and one thing that Mr. Gleason maybe didn't point out as much as I'd like to point out, is there's an 8-foot block wall here, and it runs just about the whole length of the development on site. You'll see that the development on site takes up a small portion of our larger lot. So what the end result will be is, you know, from a conceptual standpoint, our site will largely look like it is smaller than it is. So what we have to point out and we'd like to appreciate is the larger landscaping area behind, the wall for light and noise infiltration prevention, and same thing over on the side with the church use. We like the larger landscape buffer there. So in that, we also heard from the neighbors that we didn't want to create an area where people would be playing. So again, at their recommendation, there's some Troya species scattered throughout that'll discourage cut-through traffic, help with crime prevention through environmental design, these sorts of things. The other things we've done is, again, the enhanced cleaning equipment for the exhaust. It is a definite upgrade. It's not the standard fast food topper. So it's a big upgrade for reduction of odor. Drive-through sound equipment, again, a big upgrade, but it actually does lower the volume depending on ambient sound and time of day. It's a real, it works, you know, in situations that they've been deployed in conditional use cases where we have a chance to revisit it in, you know, a year or 3 years. We don't get noise complaints from them. At the end, we have to be, and we want to be a good neighbor. You know, we're going to be employing the youngsters in the neighborhood and serving an absolute need. With that, I think I may turn it over to questions.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Alsop, did you feel your question's been answered? Commissioner Alsop, did you feel your question was sufficiently answered? No, you had one for the applicant.
Sorry, writing some notes. Yeah, thank you,
No problem.
appreciate the answer.
Okay, perfect. Apologize if I missed it. Is this restaurant planned to be 24 hours a day?
I was waiting for the answer. I don't have it official yet.
Okay,
Drive-throughs, 24 hours. The restaurant isn't.
okay, thank you. Okay. We have a couple more commissioners that would like to ask some questions. Commissioner Fighter, we're going to begin with you.
I just want to confirm that I have some questions for the applicant, but I'd like to hear from the neighbors first before I follow up with them.
You
So
wanna
we'll have a chance to
You
speak.
want to have
with them.
him when he comes? Okay.
Okay.
We can hold your questions. Thank you for that. Commissioner Grice had a question.
Like to understand the landscaping that's on the south side just a little better. It looks like to me from your other plan that you showed that it's going to be sort of wispy trees. So what I would like to know is like the density that you're going to plant at and what type of trees that you intend to put into. So I would like to understand if that's going to help mitigate any of the noise that might be going from the drive-through to the neighbors.
Short answer, yes, and we think it might even help mitigate sound that they experience from Thunderbird Road. So, I mean, again, I don't expect to have this 30-foot wide drive, two-lane drive, enjoy a bunch of traffic. If you see the way that the drive-through's situated, cars are to queue in this way and exit the site. One of the nice things is the drive, the infrastructure's here, steam wall, and stylistically it remains the same. So back in there, we got acacias, a willow, acacia, blue palo verde, desert willow, and thornless honey mesquites, all peppered in. This is my conceptual landscape plan,
Right.
so I'm not going to deviate from that.
Sure. And is there like a minimum tree size that will be planted to begin with?
8 to 10 high, standard, so they come in at, I don't know the size of the box, 24-inch box trees.
Sure.
And this is the density that we've proposed.
If I could just interject in regards to the standards that would be required for not only the size of tree, but the ratio. Within any landscape buffer, the trees must be a 24-inch box size, and they have to be planted at a ratio of, I believe, 3 trees and 5 shrubs for every 1,000 square feet.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Thanks, Chair. I happen to notice your line of trees on your conceptual drawing kind of hover around the border between. Is that just a 6-foot standard wall right now currently for the current residents?
Correct.
So I notice there's pools there. Are these trees are they gonna be friendly to, dropping?
That's what.
I'm
the
making a
hope
mess of
is,
the pool.
Because after the input, we were told about messy trees, the trees that upend the walls, and
Okay,
I believe they covered the mess.
so that'll be
Part of the intent.
considered when placing the trees in the pool.
Chairman, Commissioner Hutchinson, just as a point of clarification, the question that we have before us is in regards to the use. We can certainly identify limitations as we've discussed here. When it comes to specific species and everything, that is something that we evaluate further and in much greater detail at the site plan. So we try and kind of capture everything that we've heard and boil that down during our site plan review to ensure that we're accommodating the intended species and/or results from the species, whether that's density of the actual plant material, not dropping. So we try and evaluate those specific details at the site plan.
Thanks.
Any further questions from commissioners? And I assume you're in agreement with the conditions of approval outlined in staff's report?
We are indeed, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. We may call you back up
Thank
a
you.
little bit later here, so if you can stick around, we'd appreciate it. All right, fantastic. We've received a couple of speaker request forms. Do I have all of them, Mr.? Is it just these two? All right, perfect. And did we receive any questions or comments from the public in advance of the meeting? Okay, fantastic. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call up our speakers who would like to speak, and please state your name and address for the record. We're going to begin with Philip, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Philip Cooley.
Good evening. My name's Philip Cooley, address 7652 West Rue de la Mort. My house is directly south of the proposed site. I am the person that was at both of the meetings. And as stated, I would like to state I am very appreciative of how open to comments the applicant has been through this process. Everything that we've talked about, they've tried to address. One of my big concerns is the houses immediately south of this site. They're all two-story houses. We all have swimming pools. We all like to spend time outside. With the fact they're two-story houses, we get a lot of noise in the upstairs. The bedrooms are upstairs. Again, I appreciate the effort they put into stopping the noise from their speaker systems, but we still are worried about noise from cars, people talking, all this stuff associated with a 24-hour drive-through. Again, I'm not asking that the zoning be changed to not accommodate current zoning, but I don't want the zoning to be changed to accommodate a 24-hour drive-through. You know, I just worry about what happens 2, 3 in the morning, trying to sleep. Thunderbird's noisy enough. We don't need help with the people coming in to a 24-hour drive-through. The other question I would like to ask, and I have asked, how many 24-hour drive-throughs are currently immediate adjacent to residents? And I asked that at the last Zoom meeting. The response I had was, we don't have a way to answer that. And I would be curious to know if the city of Peoria, is there not GIS capabilities that could determine this easy enough? And I'm just trying to figure out, you know, am I being picked on, or is this something that's common throughout the city of Peoria? And so if there is any way to get that answer, I would sure appreciate getting that as well. Again, thank you for your time, and thank you for your consideration.
And thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
Chairman, members of the
I can
commission,
respond to that.
if you'd like, I can address that. We do have GIS capabilities. However, that's not an attribute that we have tracked previously, so we don't have anything to base the information off of. It's something that we could evaluate for future, but it's not something that we have records on, so it would take a relatively exhaustive search of the city to evaluate placement of those drive-throughs, the hours of operation of those drive-throughs.
Okay. All right, thank you. We're going to go to our next speaker. I believe that's Robin Ware?
Yes.
Perfect. Welcome. Can you give us your name and address for the record?
Robin Ware, 7709 West Boca Raton Road. We've already discussed trees and smell and things like that, but the most important point I'd like to make, I hope Mr. Gleason has given you copies of these. The most important point I want to make is safety, public safety. Have you seen on our handout, our wall that was demolished by a car being thrown through it because of the traffic? And that was years ago. It has gotten much worse with all the small apartments being built on Thunderbird. The speed limit there is outrageous. Nobody goes the speed limit ever. We see cars now backing up from 83rd Avenue, backing up all the way to the back of our house. There's a choke point there. That choke point is going to cause a lot of problems when you have people trying to go into a shared driveway, wherever the choke point is, between the bank and this proposed Taco Bell. And the last point I'd like to make is, don't want to waste your time, but there are other alternatives. 83rd Avenue, there's a vacant lot there. That would actually has a stop sign and a turn signal. 79. Sorry, I'm 79, not 83rd. 79, there's a turn signal. Everything's there that makes it much safer for Taco Bell to go. And on the last point, my brother brought up, you do have blighted areas, slightly blighted areas on Grand Avenue that might be helped by a Taco Bell. I just don't think it's a great place to put that. Very unsafe, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any other members of the public who would like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none. I'm going to ask the applicant, anything that you want to respond to before I close the public hearing? Anything you heard that you want to rebut or add further clarity to?
I'd like to thank Mr. Cooley, and thank you for coming in tonight. Only really wanted to cover maybe one of his concerns in that our draft traffic report
Okay.
shows not an appreciable increase. I've got a note that was anticipating, maybe 30 or 40 trips in an AM hours rush, 30 or 40 in a PM rush. One thing of note is that this development shares 5 entrances that could get to the restaurant. So most people may come in through the UMB, the shared drive, but there's also 5 different places to make entry. And maybe the point of also Mr. Cooley's to the sound and the 8-foot sound wall would be a cinder block with split face with the intention of bouncing sound away from. And 8 foot's a pretty substantial wall for a development like this. Any further questions?
If you don't mind, can you pull your site plan?
Yes. Okay, this is the site plan. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so I just want to understand, there's an existing 6-foot wall along the south end of the property that is adjacent to the neighbors.
Yes.
So you're going to have another 75 feet and then another wall?
Yes. And in fact, it's 87 feet to the 8-foot wall that starts right here, only because of the location of an easement, and ends right here, again, because I think there might be an easement over here as well. Otherwise, and that's why I described that the site may look substantially smaller than it is. So this is the site as well, but this won't be used by the site. Of course.
Yeah, I have I don't know if any of the other commissioners have a concern. It just feels like it's inviting a hiding spot for, that's fine, I could see it from here.
See, that was one of the concerns.
It just feels like a potential hiding spot, you know, teenagers can hang out back there. It just, I know the intent is to try and help the neighbors with the concerns of the wall, but that to me is just inviting a hangout spot.
So we
Whether for teenagers or potential homeless or what. It just feels like it invites what these gentlemen are concerned of.
We tried to assuage that while providing the wall. The 8-foot height does a couple things. Helps with headlight incursion, and it also attenuates sound. So the 8-foot wall was a long time suggested and preferred, try to use the right words. If you were to see the site just next to us, and the bank would enjoy a similar landscaped section behind their use, so the same problems may very well exist there. We have some pretty open visual access to our open space from the church to the west. But that doesn't do much. See, this is the double-edged sword. What do we do? Motion detecting lights, that might spill into the residential use. So the answer was the smattering of cholla throughout. Let me see here, cholla. Teddy bear cholla, 44 of them throughout the area. You see, grouped along the wall, grouped along the entry point, maybe a little less so along the church boundary, but all the same, we're trying to dissuade anyone developing a, walking path through there. Visiting the site, I'm pretty confident that it doesn't present a substantial shortcut, is where you'd see.
I'm not worried, I'm not concerned about a shortcut.
Okay,
I'm
you're
concerned
looking-
about a hangout spot.
Of course.
Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, if I could perhaps add some information to that. The reason I commented in regards to the focus of tonight's meeting being on the use is things like the wall. In situations like that, staff often has a concern about the creation of what we typically refer to as nuisance areas. In this case, one of the concerns from staff would be the removal of that wall because the potential for nuisance activity created in there. So that's among the items that would be reviewed at the time of site plan.
Okay.
Do you have any further questions, Commissioner?
Yeah, is there a reason that the site feels forced to the east as opposed to having that substantial setback along the church? Meaning, could the site plan be flipped, so that way it's pushed further to the west, which could create even additional spacing from at least 2 or 3 of the neighbors?
Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, I might be able to shed some light on that. So the church to the west of this site is actually zoned at one of our single-family residential zoning districts. So we have required buffer standards from single-family residential. In this case, because the development standards for the site, other than that southern boundary, would refer to C2. It would be a 30-foot landscape buffer and a 30-foot building setback. So basically, nothing other than landscaping could occupy that first 30 feet of the western boundary. In this case, because that takes up a certain degree of space, the applicant has extended that landscaping area, which I would defer to the applicant, but it might create less travel concerns, being that they're now directly off of the shared drive.
Okay.
Any further questions, Commissioner Alsop? Good, all right. Next, we're going to go, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fighter. Apologize for that. Commissioner Alsop, you would like to ask a question.
Yeah, I do. It's ironic. I feel like we've had much larger controversial cases, and I'm more torn on this than I think any other one I've seen. I don't know if staff can answer this, and if they can't, that's okay. Whose city council district is this, and has this been discussed with them? I'm glad that that's another step in this process, but I would be interested if we had an answer, if that's something that they have been contacted.
Chairman, Commissioner Alsop, one of the procedural items that we do is we ensure that when the neighborhood meetings are conducted, that the applicant reaches out to the council assistant for that district to make sure that the scheduling can occur when that council member can attend. In this case, the council member for the district is Vice Mayor Finn. He was in attendance at the introductory meeting, so the first of those 2 meetings, and merely acted as kind of a listener to see the inquiries from the surrounding property owners and any responses that the applicant identified.
And another follow-up question, maybe a bit of a loaded one. I don't think I've ever asked this before. When staff recommends approval, have we ever received an application where staff did not recommend approval? Do the applicants usually just not proceed with that application if that's staff's conclusion?
Mr. Hawkes has a little bit more history than I do, but and that's not a reference to anything other than his experience. But typically, we identify within pre-application meetings what staff's position would likely be. Obviously, neighborhood concerns inform our position as we move forward in the formal application. But we try and give the applicant more or less forthright direction in where staff would go if the application proceeded forward, so that there's not an abundance of shock, going through this long process and these public hearings, and they get to the end and staff has, kind of changed a decision or identified a completely different position.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I don't think I have anything to add to what Cody stated. We work with the applicants from the very beginning, counsel them on the process, and if there is significant staff concerns, or as Cody mentioned, we are informed by neighborhood outreach as well. A lot of times they just may not proceed on with the case.
Sure, thank you. I think just for the record, I have my reservations about this. I sympathize for where the homeowners are coming from. I believe, my understanding is Planning and Zoning Commission's real objective is to look at the application in the technical nature of the use, and the use, was similar to what I was before. Anytime there's a rezone case, I always change my rationale of thinking to what was it before, what is it after, who lived there before, who lived there after. Understanding that fast food was allowed before, practically it wasn't, because drive-through wasn't allowed before. So I kind of look at that as a fairly significant change. But I take comfort in the fact that it will advance to City Council. I think by all technical respects, this fits and it works. I have my reservations. And to tell you the truth, I still couldn't tell you where I would vote. But I feel comfortable at least advancing it to City Council.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? All right, Commissioner Grice?
Do you know if the other two drive-throughs in that development are also 24-hour?
I would defer to the applicant in regards to the KFC facility. The other, I don't believe the applicant is a party to, so I'm not sure if they're 24 hours or not.
I don't know about that one. I wish I did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have no more requests we have no more questions for the applicant. One last call. All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming back up and providing some additional clarity. All right, we have no more speaker request forms, no more questions. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing now. Any further questions or comments from commissioners on KZ 97-10A.2 before I request a motion? Oh, we have a couple more questions. Okay, and that I would assume it was for city staff? Okay. Commissioner Patterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a couple comments.
You want to speak?
No questions. I guess I do view this as a pretty significant change of use to go from a office expectation to a 24-hour drive-through. I think the visual and noise and other impacts are quite different from the original intent for this site. With respect to the trees, I didn't realize these were two-story homes behind the property. That was one of my questions. And knowing that they are two-story, I do have more concerns about the visual and the noise impacts on that second story. The trees, they're eventually will be good for visual impacts, but it's going to take probably a year or two before they really take care of all the visual impacts from the properties. On the noise, trees really don't do much for noise. Psychologically they do, but in reality they don't. So those are my concerns about this change of use.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Patterson. Commissioner Otluski?
Yeah, and I share, I think, similar comments to what we've heard. I tend to rule based on the property owner's right to use that property. and this could be a restaurant, but that 24-hour drive-through is what keeps ringing in my head. As one commissioner said, he's not real sure how he's going to vote. I wasn't either, and I'm still kind of cloudy there. I think, unfortunately, I'm going to, for myself, I'm going to have to say, no to this just because of that 24-hour business. If it were closed at 10 o'clock at night, opened at 9 in the morning, I think that would be the differential for me. But when it goes to 24 hours, we have basically 2 homeowners being affected by this. So then that tells me, okay, is it, because when you look at it, the site plan, there's really only 2 behind it. But those 2 have to deal with what's behind them. So I'm very torn on this whole situation. And to me, I think it's the 24-hour that makes this a tough decision, so.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner. Any other comments from any other commissioners? Mr. Gleason, just a quick question. Do we know why drive-through restaurants were excluded on that particular piece? Was it because of the proximity to the residential area? Was that intentionally done for that reason? Because we thought it could be?
Chairman, unfortunately, I do not know. I would just be speculating as to why that occurred, because the properties immediately to the south were entitled at the same time. So I don't know the reasoning behind doing that for parcel 3 and then not accommodating that same level of distinction for parcel 2, which would be the remainder of the commercial center.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. Okay. I appreciate that. I certainly echo the comments here. I truly appreciate the concessions that the applicant has made for these homeowners in respect to the lighting. Lighting technology is pretty amazing. I don't think it would be, you would see that overflowing into the next property line. In terms of the odors, the hood system sounds like it's pretty state-of-the-art. Certainly, I appreciate the layout, the distance from the homeowners. The positioning of the speaker box. But I think we made a commitment to these homeowners when we put that specific zoning there. And for the reasons that I'm going to assume, since we're not sure, is that a drive-through restaurant would create an issue for these homeowners. And I can only answer it and view these things in the case of how would I feel if that was my home there. I would not want a drive-through restaurant there at all. So that's kind of the position I'm going to take. I don't think you can, I don't care how many trees, I don't care how many bushes, I don't care how much distance, these neighbors are going to hear the traffic coming through that drive-through. If they don't hear the engines, they're going to hear the boom boxes in the back of the car at 3 in the morning. We hear them on Thunderbird. I live, right up the street from here, and Thunderbird, we hear the cars going up and down all the time. They're pulling into these restaurants at 3 in the morning, and they're going to hear that. So I have serious concerns. I do not think it's the right location, and I'll be voting accordingly. So I just want to make those comments. All right, before I request a motion, any last call for any concerns or questions or comments? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion? Does anybody want to make a motion? Can Chair make a motion? Just a point of order here?
Mr. Chair, yes, you can make a motion.
All right. I'm going to move that we deny approval of KZ 97-10A.2 to the City Council. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to deny this rezoning request, Z97-10A.2 to the City Council. Any question, further, no comments, questions? All right. We have a motion on the table. Please vote. Oh, sorry, we have a question? Sorry.
Given that it's a motion to deny, a yes vote is really a no for the project. Correct. Is that right?
Thank you for clarifying that. That's an important clarification, isn't it?
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, so if
a
I like
yes-
the project, I say no. If I don't like the project, I say yes.
So, correct. If you vote yes, you are backing
no.
the motion to
You're
deny
supporting the
approval.
motion to deny the project.
To deny the project, correct. So if you were in support of this project, you would vote, I guess, no.
Yes.
Okay, I've called for the question, and it is rejected. All right, it has been denied. We have one vote, 6-1 to deny approval. Thank you, commissioners. All right, we're going to move on to our last item for the night, item 4R, Grand Commons, General Plan Amendment GPA 20-04 and rezone request Z20-06. This is a request to amend the Old Town Specific Area Plan land use designation on approximately 7.5 acres from flex mixed use to Old Town Commercial Mixed Use. The request also includes a proposed rezone for the same site from Central Commercial C3 to Planned Area Development PAD to allow for the development of a mixed-use project with commercial and retail along Grand Avenue, integrated with multifamily along 85th Avenue on property located at 8455 Northwest Grand Avenue. Has been our practice in the past, we're going to take action on the general plan amendment and the rezone requests separately, but there will be one staff report. And I understand Ms. Beck will be presenting that report tonight. So please present your report.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'll go ahead and start out, and then I'll
you're gonna be
turn
presenting.
the
Okay,
case over
excuse me.
to Amanda here. So this is a case that pertains to the Smitty's property. As you know, the Smitty's building was recently raised a couple weeks ago. The applicant tonight is the city of Peoria through Scott White. He's from the Real Estate Development Office, and you might recall from a few meetings ago, we were talking about the Peoria Place property, and so he talked about the mission of the redo group, but essentially that is to engage strategically sited properties throughout the city, collaboratively work with the owners, and work to reposition the properties to a land use entitlement that better fits the vision and context of the area. So in this case, Scott White of Real Estate Development Office is the applicant as part of this. So I'll turn over to Amanda now.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, Chair Nelson and Commissioners. So I will be giving tonight's last staff report on the last few items. As you noted, you'll be taking two separate actions, so one for GPA 20-04 and one for Z 20-06. I do want to make a point of clarification. So Table 1 on page 8 of the staff report notes that there is a minimum square footage for the commercial as 7,000 square feet. Staff worked up until the 11th hour with the applicant to remove certain items from the PAD, particularly this because it's almost unenforceable both for the city and for the future property owners. So we worked with the applicant to have that removed, but it was not reflected in the staff report, so my apologies. As Chris noted, the city's real estate development office, which is headed by Scott White, is the applicant for these concurrent cases. The site in question is just in our backyard, located off of Grand Avenue in between 85th and 84th. And as you can see, it's also not very far from our historic Old Town. So the proposal, as previously highlighted, encompasses modifying the Old Town SAP, which would be an amendment to our general plan land use map, and then also designation and rezone of the property to planned area development. So the applicant is requesting to modify the the Old Town SIP land use designation from what is currently flexed mixed use, and that envisions large regional uses such as convention centers or hotels or institutions of higher education. And then they are proposing to instead modify this to a more appropriate designation of the Old Town Commercial Mixed Use, which has neighborhood serving office, retail, commercial that's then integrated with medium to high density residential. The rezone would be to change the existing C3 or central commercial, which is an Old Town centric zoning district. It's very similar to our intermediate commercial C2, but it is only for Old Town. And then that would be changing to the Grand Commons Planned Area Development, which is the name, if you will, of the project. The applicant is proposing mixed-use development, which isn't permitted by any of our city zoning districts. They're just straight zoning for single or complementary uses, Euclidean, if you will, zoning. And as such, they would need to rezone, and that's why they've submitted for the PAD. So contextually, this is in our backyard. This site is within the 4 square miles that encompasses what is known as Old Town, which focuses on the historic core of the city where we began. The site is located within a 1/4 mile from Osuna Park, which you can see in the bottom right hand of the screen, and also the Peoria Center for the Performing Arts, as well as several Valley Metro bus routes. And this is just northwest of the new Park and Ride that opened at 83rd and Peoria Avenue. To the west are existing multifamily developments of Cedar Meadows and Villas at Montebella. And then also, as you can see, the site is just surrounded by local small businesses. So we've got K-May Donuts on the corner, several businesses in Wagner Plaza too, like Brothers Restaurant, and then Cactus Chiropractic and Don Lencho's. So definitely a part of kind of our niche Peoria downtown. Now, for the conceptual development plan, this mixed-use PAD has outlined 2 different configurations of the site since we don't have developers online and therefore we don't have the site plans to review. So this is all conceptual to guide what future development will look like. For sake of aligning with the languages in the PAD itself, we'll refer to these as options. So the first, known as the commercial option, you can see on screen here. If the site were to develop in this manner, it would be horizontal mixed use, so separated with the commercial non-residential uses along Grand Avenue, and then multifamily residential accessed from 85th Avenue. And that would be, potentially an anticipated 14,000 square feet of commercial non-residential uses, and a maximum of 187 multifamily units along 85th. So the 2 components would interact through a shared open space or gathering amenity that you see in the center. It's that gray box just south of the calming circle, or the roundabout, excuse me. Because the ultimate configuration isn't known, the PAD does allow for 1 drive-through option on site, and that's 1 maximum for the whole entire site. So once it develops, there won't be any further. And they anticipate that they could function, as you see on screen, either with the building or as a standalone kiosk option. So the other option is the mixed use option, and this is what we think of as kind of the exciting vertical mixed use. So you would have ground floor, retail, office, commercial along Grand Avenue, and then there would be potential to have residential units on the floors above that. Of course, the section along 85th Avenue would be purely reserved for that multifamily residential. So in that regard, the PAD, we worked out with the applicant that the PAD ensures that this site will develop as mixed use. So they have a land plan, a bubble plan, not specifically called out with square footage, but it does note that the portion of the site that goes along Grand Avenue needs to be for commercial or non-residential uses. And to help solidify that, they've called out parcel 1 and a parcel 2, with the underlying zoning kind of referencing back to our zoning districts of intermediate commercial C2 and then multifamily residential, which is RM1. So the language in the PAD notes that standalone residential is prohibited in that parcel 1. And also, if it were to go as vertical mixed use, which is our hope, that would be the best option, it needs to be limited based on the square footage of the commercial that ultimately is built out. So that's sort of to ensure that this truly does develop as a mixed use center, which is what we're hoping for, and part of the reason why they went with the flexibility of a planned area development. As for the proposed development standards, you will see they really push for a development that is more urban in density and intensity, which really aligns with the redevelopment goals that are outlined in the Old Town SAP. Commercial mixed uses would have similar development standards as those of our intermediate or C2 commercial zoning district. Unique to this pad would be the proposed building height, which, oh, it's not nearly as dark as I thought it would be on screen. It's on the bottom there, lightly highlighted in pink. So the height of the buildings would be 60 feet. And this is really so if the developers that come along down the line want to do vertical mixed use, we really need that height for them to get the different mix of uses. And they kind of outline that in their narrative and justification, because staff did ask them to provide support for the request. Even though it's definitely in line with the redevelopment vision we see for Old Town, it's still not something we have currently seen and therefore need to kind of have some justification for why. Also, to go with that main street feel where buildings are pulled towards the street, there's more activity with the street, you're seeing more pedestrians. We worked with them on doing unique setbacks, so these differ, and they are unique to the fact that this is an infill site. So you have 10-foot setback along Grand Avenue, and then all of the other property boundaries of the PAD would not have a setback. Let's see if that, there, okay. Now you can see that highlight much better. So similar to the commercial uses, the standards for the multifamily, we asked them to align with the 60-foot, excluding the 30 feet along 85th Avenue. So buildings along 85th Avenue need to step down to 48 feet, which aligns with the height in our traditional multifamily residential zoning district. And that's really just so it's context sensitive to what's existing in Old Town, and it acts as a little bit of a transition, but it still allows them to get at a more urban and walkable density by having the rest of the buildings be taller and fit more floors and units. So the other thing that's unique to this PAD because of its infill nature is they have requested reduced parking ratios. And this is something that we worked with them on pretty closely because it is an infill site, but it also acts as an entry and focal point into Old Town and has the potential to be a very interesting, very great catalyst. So we wanted to avoid expanses of parking fields. So we worked with them on how we could address needs for residents and employees or the patrons of the businesses in the future. So what you'll see on screen is a comparison. The box in red is our current standards for multifamily. So we require 1.5 spaces for a 1-bedroom, and then for anything that has 2 or more bedrooms, we'd require 2 spaces. And then we require 1 space per 10 units for guests. And then, as I note on screen, we don't currently have anything that addresses the leasing office. And what they have proposed is 1 space for 1 bedroom and then 1.65 spaces for anything that's 2-bedroom or above. And they did address staff's concern about making sure that there is parking that's separate from the residents and also guests that functions for the leasing office. Because that is something that does occasionally come up with these new luxury apartments is there can be parking issues when everyone tries to park at the center where the leasing office is. So we just wanted to mitigate for that. Similarly, they are requesting reductions for the non-residential uses. And so they have aligned what they are proposing in the PAD with industry recommendations from the Urban Land Institute. And they also provided staff with a parking study and a white paper from Kimley Horn where they looked at peak demand of different uses during, throughout the day to see how do you right-size parking. So what we typically require for office, for example, would be 1 space per 200 square feet. Similar for retail, it'd be 250 square feet or 1 space per 250 square feet. And then restaurants, we break it up from the serving area and the prep area, and that's how we determine the full parking ratio required. Those are the anticipated uses that they think will come in, and so they really drilled down on the parking reduction for that. So they focused on office, retail, and restaurant. And for anything else that would be permitted under C2 zoning that isn't already excluded by the PAD because they feel it may not be appropriate with the the mixed-use feel that they're going for. But so any other use would fall under the 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area as far as uses. They have also noted that they would permit for, once development came in, parking reductions based on other things that encourage multimodal transportation. So if you put in so many bike racks, you can get a reduction proximity to transit, which as I've already noted, this particular site is on a couple of bus routes, both regional and local. So that will be evaluated once we get actual site plans, and we can determine at that level, okay, how close are we to the bus stop? How many shared vehicles are going to be, how many drop-off pickup places are we have for shared vehicles, bike parking, all of that sort of stuff. As far as design guidelines and standards for the PAD, they have some that are unique to the site that are in addition to what we require in the design review manual. So they're not necessarily deviating from our requirements, they're just adding in addition to ensure that the development is very clear in the future and is very, they include a lot of illustrative images, if you will, without specifically stating one must build with this type of architecture or this kind of color palette. So they tried to provide a lot of direction without limiting. So some of those standards include having a wide sidewalk along Grand Avenue. They've proposed 8 feet, which would give it a more pedestrian-friendly environment. I mean, Grand Avenue is what it is, and we recognize that, but we still want to make it hospitable for people who might be walking to, and we want to encourage people to walk to this development once it's complete. As far as encouraging that activity on the street, even though these will be drive aisles, but that activity on the street internal to the project, they've proposed 10-foot wide sidewalks, and that would really be to accommodate things like plazas or other gathering areas. One of the things that they put in the PAD is that they would like 200 square feet of outdoor seating per building. And then they've put in shade minimums for those areas as well, so they are hopefully usable throughout the year, even when it's 9 months of 100 degrees here. And they've also put in information as well as the illustrative images that you see on screen as far as the building massing. So when we say Main Street, we want them to pull the buildings forward and not have your first impression of the development to be a parking field. And in addition to that, there needs to be a focal point to each of the buildings at the corner or the entrance. So more architectural embellishment, maybe a larger massing, sort of like what you see on screen. Similar guidelines for the multifamily. So they have put in that the buildings along 85th, directly along 85th, would parallel the street, and part of that is so they activate the street. So they have tried to put guidance in that those buildings should include things like bay windows, stoops, or porches, so residents have the option to interact, so to speak, or if you're a person walking down 85th, you can see that people live there and it doesn't feel as vacant. So there's definitely some activity going on and the buildings don't put their back to the street, if you will. Something that we already require, but they're just reinforcing and making very clear, is that the buildings will have a distinct base based on the average person's height, and then a middle and a top for architectural interests. So lots of vertical and horizontal articulation going on. Again, there's a lot of emphasis on shade in the humanities and open space. The two elements of the project will connect through those open spaces. So there's a lot of pedestrian connectivity, and then there's also that shared space, which we don't really know what it will look like at this point, but more than likely it's going to be an open space or a plaza sort of feel. In regard to the proposed amendment to the Old Town Specific Area Plan, the subject site is located within the Central District and identified in the Old Town SAP. So this district is intended to facilitate redevelopment following transit-oriented development, or TOD design principles. The revitalization intent is for this section of Old Town to become a hub with multimodal transportation, compact and integrated activities, and active open space and public gathering spaces. So certainly the proposed amendment to the neighborhood serving designation of Old Town commercial use would align this property with the goals of having a mix of uses of both commercial and residential together. Many of the residential land use designations within the Old Town SAP have some of the highest densities that we see in the city, which is great because this is a prime, this particular subject site is prime for that sort of density since it's a large parcel rather than trying to replat several small parcels together. So it has that potential to be a real catalyst for activity. The amendment to the Old Town SAP would align the property with a core principle of the plan, which is to create a safe and pedestrian-friendly environment that enhances the Old Town experience for all user groups. So, due to the COVID pandemic, the applicant was unable to hold an in-person meeting, but we did hold a virtual meeting via GoTo on August 25th. Thanks to the internet, everyone's afforded the ability not to say their name, but we did have 29 attendees, and that included city staff and the applicant team, which felt like a pretty good attendance rate, even considering that it was virtual. Some of the comments from those who did attend focused on the need for sufficient parking for the uses because this is adjacent to Old Town, and the Old Town Overlay District does not require off-site parking requirements because we want to encourage that walkable urban environment. Another concern brought up was the desire not to have volume on the existing roadways negatively impacted by developing the site. And then lastly, people wanted to ensure that the multifamily was context sensitive to the area, just because it's an established area. It has a very unique feel. Residents who have been here for a long time. So in regard to some of those concerns, as far as the parking concern, while Old Town doesn't have off-site parking requirements, it's not an area of the city where we currently have parking issues. It sounds funny to say, but having a parking issue in Old Town would be an indication that we were successfully revitalizing that part of the city. So that would mean that we would have more activity, and that's something that we definitely want. So as funny as it sounds, it's a problem we would like to have in the future. And this isn't and that's not unusual for other downtowns. You see no off-site parking minimums in places like Roosevelt Row in Phoenix or Capitol Hill in Seattle. So while the applicant has proposed some unique parking ratio reductions, what they have done is tried to right-size the parking because they still need to make sure that the market feels comfortable that they can park the uses. Most tenants or builders aren't interested in buying into a piece if they don't think they can park it and get people there. So that's something that they tried to balance, is making sure that they're not going to spill out into the existing area, but they aren't putting a hole in the urban fabric that exists there by putting in a large expanse of parking. As for how the development will fit into the existing area, we hope that the buildings will be tall to get that higher density. It's definitely exciting to see that someone might be interested in putting that sort of development in. But they certainly won't be as high as the uses that would be envisioned under the flex mixed use land use category. Convention centers, large hotels, I mean, we're talking a footprint of possibly 100 feet high, so these are definitely much smaller in that regard, and it definitely feels more appropriate to the area. And while the design guidelines in the PAD don't specifically call out a type of architecture or how to step down, we'll be looking at that at the site plan level in regard to what's in the PAD and also the design review manual. So we'll try to make sure that it's reflective of the area, and we try and ensure that there's a feeling of privacy for residents that already live there across 85th Avenue. As for meeting notification requirements, a notice of application and a notice of hearing postcard were mailed to property owners within a 600-foot radius. Staff did have a few people who were interested parties that were outside of the radius, and they were added, so they were included with the notice of hearing postcard. And then, of course, we notified HOAs within 1 mile, and it was noticed in the paper, and the site was posted on 2 locations, so one on 85th and then also Grand Avenue, since that's the more high-volume corridor. To summarize staff's findings from the staff report, the general plan amendment GPA 20-04 is both in conformance with the Old Town SAP and the 2040 general plan. The amendment aligns with several principles put forth in the Old Town SAP, such as increasing economic vitality by promoting mixed uses and neighborhood-serving uses, fostering character and a sense of place that enhances the Old Town experience, and crucially, boosting activity in Old Town by bringing in more residents to support those existing businesses to help them flourish. The Grand Commons rezone case Z20-06 proposes design guidelines and site layout requirements unique to the infill site, which will take the vacant parcel to a more walkable development that supports activity in this area, with elements such as outdoor patios within the commercial space and inviting pedestrian environment throughout the rest of the site. For General Plan Amendment GPA 20-04, staff recommends that the Commission recommend approval to City Council. For the Grand Commons rezone Z20-06, staff recommends approval to City Council subject to the conditions in Exhibit 1 in the staff report. So, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, with that, I will take any questions, and the applicant is here tonight to also present.
Thank you for that report. This is exciting stuff. This is a big deal.
I agree.
This is, thank you for that report. Do any commissioners have any questions? Staff? Oh, thank you. Commissioner Lusky.
Yeah, so it's a quick comment. Originally, when I interviewed to become a planning and zoning commissioner, there was a question of the number one project or the number one thing you would envision tackling on the P&Z is Grand Avenue. And after all these years of being here, we've dabbled with it, but this is really exciting to see it. So it's kind of come full circle for me. The question I have is regarding the parking. It seemed like from the numbers, that's a pretty big drop in the number of spaces. Is that, and I understand the idea of not having a big parking lot that, you know, you got to walk 30, 40 spaces to get somewhere, but to keep it that mixed use. Is that going to be sufficient for these businesses? Because I know a lot of times you get some of these smaller units and it's hard to find a parking spot. And so I just don't want us to, I guess I need to understand a little bit more about the parking.
Sure. Oh, that is much smaller. I'm sorry about that. So this is unique for staff. We haven't seen a parking reduction like this before, and so we did ask for support that provided industry recommendations so we could kind of compare what our zoning ordinance says and what industry standards say should be workable for the different uses. And so it's a little bit small, I'm sorry about that, but they give a comparison of what we currently require and what is recommended by the Urban Land Institute. And so ULI developed these parking standards through research and also reaching out to parking professionals and then developers of different uses, and looked at, so the way they developed this is they looked at peak demand for the various uses, but not as standalone uses. So the key part here is that they're shared uses. And so the idea is that as the demand shifts throughout the day for the different uses, say, you know, office, pretty typical 9 to 5 as far as the employees, but you might have people throughout the day. Whereas a restaurant, you're probably going to have a couple of rushes throughout the day, maybe morning, afternoon, and evening, and it's a little bit more dead in between. So by sharing those parking spaces, you kind of hit an optimal sweet spot while still trying to provide for the bare minimum that's necessary for them to function. So the site is meant to function as a whole, and so what they are trying to do is provide a minimum for the residential as standalone, so each unit would have at least one space, and then also a bare minimum for the commercial uses, but then all the other spaces internal to the site would be shared. So while it's likely that the multifamily will be gated, most communities are these days, the shared parking would be outside of that, so obviously it would still be accessible to patrons and employees for the commercial uses along Grand Avenue. And hopefully, through the different peak times, if you will, they can share that parking and not need so much excess around each of their uses. Commissioner, did that answer your question sufficiently? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Olszewski. Commissioner Patterson, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great use for this site. Really glad to see this come forward. After the last agenda item, I've got 24-hour drive-throughs on my brain. And when I saw the conceptual layout with the C2 and the drive-through, I immediately think, oh, well, can we have a 24-hour restaurant right next to an apartment building?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Patterson, yes, let me go back to that conceptual. Sorry. So to answer your question, yes, this is likely. I think given the size of the site, that it shouldn't too negatively impact. I mean, that's a fair amount of space. I don't know off the top of my head how many linear feet would be between those uses. But there would obviously be concern about some of the same issues we talked about with the previous agenda item as far as noise, mitigation, the hours that people would be accessing. What I would note, though, that this is next to Grand Avenue, which is a high-volume corridor. It's one of the state highways. And so to a certain extent, there's going to be activity kind of all hours of the day to begin with. But hopefully the way they've oriented the buildings will mostly mitigate that. So while this is conceptual, both of the commercial and the mixed-use options sort of envision the buildings to go east-west. This is a little bit skewed the way it is on the image, but so mostly east-west. So hopefully only the end units would get a lot of issues as far as noise or light intrusion, because part of the reason they had them oriented that way is so the amenities and people can have gathering spaces in between the buildings. So I don't know, Commissioner Patterson, if we can fully address those concerns at this point. It's something definitely for us to consider when they come in for a site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Fighter, you're next.
Thank you. The one thing Commissioner Patterson referenced, I think the difference here is that these aren't existing homes and we're changing it. These residents that choose to live here will already know that the zoning's in place, or the retail will already be there. So they'll get to make the choice, where the folks that we were dealing with on the last case didn't have that. So with that case, in that scenario, I'm comfortable. I think this is great. I think the redo office is fantastic, what you guys are starting to do. I think the redevelopment of Old Town is critical to our city's growth, and this is the kind of project I really like. My one concern is I am personally not a fan of the individual unit bungalows, multifamily product. Is it possible to do a minimum density on the multifamily so we don't get into this scenario where we have somebody that wants to convert that multifamily use? Because to help really revive this area and create great opportunities for retailers, we need the density. And in a couple locations, we've given up that density, and I don't think this is an area that we should risk that possibility. That's my concern.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fighter, I don't know if there's a minimum density prescribed here, but what I can say is that we do have two development options that are part of the PAD that signify and illustrate multi-story, multifamily buildings. So I would read that to be that's the expectation, that's the form of development and the expectation we have there. If somebody was to come in down the road and propose a bungalow product, I would say that's inconsistent with the PAD and would require them to go back through the process.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Fighter, to your point, if that were to be a point of concern, certainly at the city council point, so city council could potentially add an additional condition of approval that more aligns the density with what's proposed in the Old Town SAP. So that would be anywhere from 18 to 25 dwelling units per acre. So their maximum currently is 25 dwelling units per acre, which would allow them approximately 187 units. Obviously, not a huge apartment complex, but given this site is infill, I think it will require some balancing with our amenity requirements. So to echo Chris, I don't know that this is something we've talked about with the applicant, but it's certainly a good point that we don't want this to develop at a lower density.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Fider, just to add on too, I mentioned the development options that are shown there, but there's also, if you recall, in the PAD, there are development photos that it kind of describes our expectation for the scale and form of development that we expect there, so.
Does that address your question, Commissioner Fider? Any further questions? All right, Commissioner Alsop.
I love the proposal. I love the product. I'm all for density in this location. I think just 1 or 2 meetings ago, I complained about too much parking in Peoria after our meeting, so I'm happy to see the parking reduction. I'm not saying that conversation is the reason you guys reduced the parking, but I'm grateful to see that. And the drive-through for me is not a concern because this is a multifamily product. The expectation for the homeowner is very different than single family. And I share the concerns that Commissioner Fider had, and I think Chris's comments are on point, that it would be out of character with the PAD and they'd have to go through the process again. Hopefully we get something like I'm seeing right here. I think that'd be fantastic. I'm happy to see that.
Great, thank you very much. Any further questions or comments from commissioners before I open the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. And assume the applicant is present. I see him over there. Mr. White, would you like to make some comments?
I would. Thank you very much. I appreciate being before you tonight. The matter before you tonight is actually very exciting. I say this from the perspective of the Real Estate Development Office. There's a lot of history with this property. There's a lot of history with revitalization and redevelopment in Old Town generally, as you are all well aware. And this is a moment in time where all the planets actually aligned for us. And so what we see is, as the next slide will show, is what I think is a fantastic site. And you're probably wondering, really, Scott, why is that fantastic? Well, it's a fantastic site to me for a couple of reasons. When you look at it, it's large, 7.5 acres. It's one of the larger pieces in that immediate area. It's bordered by existing businesses, restaurant and services and retail, and Wagner Plaza 1, Wagner Plaza 2. We have Cactus Chiropractic and Don Lencho's restaurant, Firestone. It is close to public facilities, the PCPA, Osuna Park. So it's a natural extension of city investment that's already occurred, a private investment that's already occurred. We have great frontage on Grand Avenue, which getting rid of those large expanses of parking fields is like a real win opportunity. We have the ability to bring pads up to Grand Avenue and activate it. We have opportunities for creating pedestrian connectivity within the mixed-use environment, as well as to Old Town proper. We have opportunities to bring market rate rental units into Old Town to bolster the economic demographics of Old Town that then help with supporting our local businesses and over time, perhaps attracting more businesses. So to me, this is a very exciting site, and it's a very exciting moment in time that this is before us. As the next slide will show, this is what it used to look like. Idled, vacant since the 90s, deteriorated. large parking fields, the exact thing we don't want. And so as you look to the next slide, now we have this blank slate. What could this be? We want density. We want mixed uses. You know, we want to start the creation of a foothold on Grand Avenue, a beachhead, so to speak, so we can continue to revitalize and redevelop going further up Grand Avenue. And so you see Wagner Plaza 2 right there in the left corner, and the various businesses surrounding it. This is that moment in time. So if you go to the next slide, you know, the Real Estate Development Office, we work with a private planning and design firm, Decker, Parrish, and Sabatini, and Kimley Horn on the civil engineering and the traffic engineering side. And so what we do, as Chris Hawkes mentioned, is we try to reposition key parcels, working with developers, working with property owners to bring it more in line with what's marketable, reflective of market potential, and in alignment with city goals and objectives. But it really takes a whole team, a team outside of this. And that team includes David Benton on the city attorney's office, and Chris Lemke, and Chris Hawkes, and Lori Deaver, and Amanda Beck, and the developer who's here tonight, Steve Addison of SJ Acquisitions. If they had not tied up the site, gotten into escrow with this piece of property, and worked with me to have the opportunity to put this project together, working with all of our city departments, then this moment in time wouldn't be here. So, you know, I want to thank Steve for having the vision of having the faith in our old town and bringing this private capital and investment into our old town. As the next slide will show, you know, you'll see what's before you in terms of what our work plan on this project included. But what I really want to focus on is the collaboration. You know, the excellent work in the city attorney's office and the code enforcement staff that we worked with as part of getting the Smitty's building demolished. That was huge. And so that's a big win for the city and great teamwork there. The teamwork in terms of working with the developer and the developers' concerns and what they need in terms of flexibility and what we need in terms of some level of certainty relative to city goals and objectives. So that willingness to work together and that spirit of cooperation is huge and very much appreciated. And the great collaboration and help from the planning department and the engineering department, both on the traffic engineering side and the development engineering side, is huge. And this is a great model of teamwork. And I think that, to me, is the most important piece of this. So I'm very appreciative of that and look forward to this project getting built and start moving farther up Grand Avenue for the further revitalization of this area. And to the question about density, we want density. You know, that's what this is going to be about. It's making that statement that density can work here, mixed use can work here, and moving this forward. So I want to thank you for your consideration on this. And I want to, again, introduce Steve Addison and ask him to come up and maybe make a couple statements.
Thank you for your time and the ability to come up and talk about this project a little bit. We're very excited about it. As Scott pointed out, this truly has been a team effort. We have other development projects going on throughout the valley and also outside of the state of Arizona. And I can tell you that this has been a great process to work with the city of Peoria, the staff, Amanda, Chris, everybody that we've dealt with so far. We've had some early conversations with city's attorney, David Benton. We appreciate all his help too in navigating the demo aspect of it. Scott and his team, DPS, Kimley Horn, everybody's come together to put together what I think is a pretty good project. To note a couple of things that were mentioned, the 24-hour drive-through, I think the comments were made, and it makes sense that any residents coming to this location, they're looking for a more urban feel. They're looking for that walkability. They're waiting for that Old Town plan to come together. To be honest, when we first started looking at a project here in Peoria, we were looking at opportunities within the existing Old Town plan and realized that there's a greater opportunity here with the Smitty's building, and if we could bring in some of that market rate apartments and bring in some of those individuals who are that have the income levels that are going to spur that additional development of smaller shops, bistros, that sort of thing. So that's our goal there. So I think anybody coming in, our goal is not to necessarily have a 24-hour drive-through there. We've talked about different uses for that drive-through. I don't have anything against Taco Bell, although I don't usually eat there. Our goal is not to put that style of user there. That doesn't fit with the kind of people that we want living in our community. Working with Amanda and her team, we want to have great amenities at this location, and so they just don't work together. To have a market rate, nice amenity, multifamily project, and then put in something that the residents don't really want. We want them to be able to walk to this place, maybe not use the drive-through, but they want to be able to go there and eat and enjoy the shops and potentially restaurant that might be there. Another comment was made about the bungalow multifamily concept. We do have a project like that in a different municipality in the valley, and I can tell you for several reasons why at least we would not pursue that type of product. One, this is an urban location. Density is key. Anyone wanting to live here, wanting to live that close to Grand Avenue, they're not going to want the bungalow style. The bungalow style is suited more towards families. Most of our unit mix is 1s and 2 bedrooms. Currently, we don't have any 3 bedrooms in our unit mix, so this truly is this is not a suburban development targeted towards larger families, which is more of the bungalow style where they want some small bit of a yard or things along those lines. And the reality is the economics. This property is too expensive to not do high density. So from an economic standpoint, the bungalow just wouldn't work. We talked a little bit about parking and reducing the ratios. The reality is in order to get the residents that we want, we also have to be able to provide the parking that they need. Again, we're not having large units where you're going to have 2 and 3 and 4 cars per unit to where they're going to need a lot of parking. There is a bus stop that's on or adjacent to our property. So, to the extent that there's public transportation, biking, Ubers, things of that nature is what we're looking for as well. I think those were the majority of the comments, but I just want to take an opportunity to say thank you very much for looking at our project and wanted to thank the team. This truly has been and you can't, I promise you cannot say this about every municipality. This truly has been a good experience since we put the property in escrow. And so I appreciate everything that Peoria has done for us.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. We share your opinion of the city and its staff.
Yeah.
So you will get no argument from us. So I appreciate that. While you're up there, I just want to make sure any commissioners have any questions or comments of either these two gentlemen. I think we're good, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one speaker request form I've received. Any additional concerns that we've received? Okay. All right, so we have, is it Mr. Cordero? Yes. All right, sir, you can state your name and address for the record and.
Remigio Cordero, 8360 West Carroll Court, Peoria, Arizona, just south of City Hall here. So I'm familiar with Smitty's, the site. Been going there since the 80s, mid-80s. My mom used to take me and get my hair cut there and go shopping. We used to live in the old Surprise, and we'd go down Grand because this was the only shopping center that was, or in this case, grocery store that was within miles of where we lived. Aside going from like a small mom and pop shop, which I feel is going to be a need moving forward in downtown. But one of the things I wanted to bring up, there's 2 items I wanted to bring up, is staff mentions walkability, and they mentioned pedestrian connections. which I feel is more critical in this downtown core, which I feel is going to be more paramount, that we need to identify more within this downtown core. My wife and I walked on a couple Saturdays ago to go check out the posting over here off of Grand Avenue. And Grand Avenue is it's a mini freeway, to be honest with you. I drive it every day. So I don't feel that the pedestrian connection on Grand is going to be as beneficial as it would be on 84th, as also Peoria Avenue, as the aerial shows that there's a portion of the building that touches, or portion of the property that touches Peoria Avenue. I feel that their sidewalks need to be larger and shading needs to be provided. When we were walking on a Saturday, as you know, we've had many days that are over 100+ degrees, and walking at 7:30 in the morning was pretty hot. So I think that we need to take a look at this more intently. I'm not necessarily opposed to the entitlement change, what staff is looking to do. I do agree that some multifamily will be a catalyst to supplement or provide adequate financial benefits towards the businesses. But one of the things I really want to look at is not only that, but I also want to look at that site plan that they provided, that there are 2 conceptual site plans. I feel that it needs to go to a design review board, and I was going to ask staff if this is going to go to a design review board. And if so, or if not, I would like to ask for a stipulation that this site, although I'm all for the entitlements that are being set forth today, I'm looking for a stipulation, 2 stipulations actually. One stipulation that this site goes before the design review board, and that we can ensure that the public has a little bit more input on it, because right now this is just a PAD. They're just talking about development standards and you know, just certain processes that they're looking at changing within that booklet. But one of the critical things I feel is that site plan. That site plan is something that we need to look at more intently. We need to ensure that not only are we going to have the commercial off of Grand, which I feel is going to be beneficial. We'll need a drive-through on there, because, I mean, come on, 100,000 people a day, if not more, drive down Grand. You got several cities feeding through, passing through, and going to work each day. But one of the critical things that we need to identify is, are we going to provide those type of buildings that can serve smaller type businesses that are more geared towards the south portion, leading towards the center core of downtown? That's the one thing that we need to really truly look at. And I believe that if we create a stipulation that this goes through the design review board, and that we can look at this site plan more intently, and also provide more shading along the 84th Avenue and more shading along Peoria. And of course, we provide shading along Grand, but we really need to look at that more intently. Another thing is parking. Commissioners, I saw you all hint on that, parking. I understand too much parking is not good, but again, if you've been downtown, I grew up in the West Valley my whole life. And I know, and I've gone to the fiestas in downtown Peoria. I've gone to the German Fest in downtown Oktoberfest. We lived right here. I walked here today, right now. I walked here earlier today. And so that's what I'm more concerned with, is not just the walkability, but also if we're going to create a destination location for this site, where is the parking going to be? Is there opportunity through that TIA, that traffic impact analysis, is there a way that we can have a podium parking structure instead of just surface parking? You know, those are the things that we need to look at overall. It's great to see when you have something that was old, and I mean, Smitty's served a great purpose, right? But it's beneficial to see something that's now being proposed in a site. But I'm not saying just rush into development, because if it's great that you have a developer that's interested in an area that has been neglected, and I'm not putting it on any of you, but again, certain elected officials that have neglected downtown for a while, It's been that way. I mean, we've been tearing down buildings. We have Historic Preservation Society, and we're not even doing anything with the buildings. We're tearing them down. But aside from that, that'll be for city council. My true focus on this is to ensure that the public gets to look at the concrete, the site plan when it is concrete, not conceptual, and that we provide a better pedestrian connections on those streets that I mentioned. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any commissioners have any questions of this gentleman? We don't, but thank you for your comments. Go
One
ahead.
thing, can we add the 2 stipulations on there, on the Exhibit 1?
We're going to ask them to comment on some of the issues you raised. Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to add that tonight, but we'll see what they have to say about that.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments. Obviously, you love this area, you're invested in it, and you feel strongly that it needs to be developed in a smart way. So we appreciate that. Yeah, I think we've taken some good notes from the comments you've made.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Some of the issues that were raised, does staff want to address some of those? I've written down a few: the design review board review, the shading issue, and the traffic impact analysis is what I captured. You may have grabbed some others, but can we?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, maybe perhaps I can address the process question that we had there. We do have we have a site plan review process. That would be the next step in the process. And in that regard, it's an administrative process. We're looking at not only does the site plan meet all of our PAD requirements, if this gets passed, does it meet our zoning ordinance? But we also look at it for its adherence to our design review manual. So we'll look at everything like connections, the architectural, all that stuff's part of that. But the site plan process is currently an administrative process. We do provide notification to all residents, I believe, within a, is it 300-foot radius. But what I'll do, I mean, Mr. Cordero made some great comments tonight. We'll take his information down, and certainly when we get a site plan in, we'll make sure that we get notification to him. We certainly like to have his input as when the site plan comes in. We do have a design review board, but right now they don't have the charge in the city code to hear, site plans. We're looking at that in the future as a possibility to consider a certain level or scale of site plans, but right now they don't have that charge in the city code.
Okay. Just a second, sir, on the traffic impact analysis, will that be done? I know that was an issue he raised as well as part of this.
Good evening, Chair Nelson and Commissioners. There's already been a traffic analysis prepared, but the traffic analysis looked at access control, looked at traffic that's being generated by the site.
Okay.
The TIA is needed to talk to ADOT for access to Grand Avenue because that is controlled by Arizona Department of Transportation. And anything that happens on Grand Avenue will need the traffic study and permits through ADOT if we do median improvements. If there's additional sidewalk improvements on Grand, that's not a City of Peoria permit process. That's going to be an ADOT permit process. And then we're going to have to get into who maintains that infrastructure. Is it ADOT? Is it Peoria? And those discussions simply haven't happened yet. I'm not to say that we won't look at wider sidewalks on Grand, but we're not there yet. The traffic study focused just on the traffic itself. When it comes to parking, and Mr. Cordero referenced parking in the traffic study, that's going to be a separate analysis that's part of the PAD process. And you saw some of the numbers that was using a ULI as a reference for parking ratios. That's the direction for the reduction in parking. It's not necessarily tied to the traffic study. And there's a real specific reason for that, is because I got to give this traffic study to ADOT for approval for access to this site off Grand Avenue and closure of 84th Avenue towards Grand. That's part of this, for their access management, that they're going to expect that. We don't want to put additional information in there that ADOT's not going to want to review and be part of. And so the study was prepared primarily for ADOT.
Oh, I see. Mr. Cordero, it sounds like you had an additional comment you wanted to make. I can let you make that quickly.
Yes, that's one of the things that I was looking to not have, is make this not administrative process and more of a public process on the design. Although, like I stated before, I'm in support of the entitlement change. I'm fully in support of it, but given that how critical this site is, it's the starting site to further kick off other development within this downtown. It's critical that the downtown, more than 300 feet, because 300 feet, I mean, what is that? That's Peoria Cafe. It's the apartment complex where, most of them aren't gonna, no one's here tonight, it's just me. But I'm just saying, I feel that if we advertise this more, increase the notification area more, then that would be more beneficial for the overall area. Because then if everybody, not everybody, but if a lot of people in the area weigh in, because I'm a realist, I understand not everybody's going to weigh in. But if more people can weigh in and everybody comes to a consensus, then hey, we chose it. That's what we chose. I mean, we're not, I'm not going to argue with the architect on its design. He designed the building. But I'm looking at more from a functionality standpoint to make it a true downtown development and not a gated off suburban style development. We do live, it is a suburb,
Right.
but this is a downtown. And I agree with you on the density, totally agree with you on that. And that's why I'm saying, we can't have just a gated off apartment complex like the one west of 85th Avenue and the one north across from the church. We got to have something a little bit more. That's all I'm asking. And that's why I'm saying we have that design review board, and I feel that that Peoria needs to utilize that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. Commissioner Patterson, you had a question. Was it for this gentleman or
Well,
was
I
it?
just had a comment. It's
You had
been
a
a lot of
comment. Okay.
A lot of discussion. Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
There's been a lot of discussion about parking and traffic, and I just wanted to say that I know very well the consultant that you have on this project, and they're probably one of the best in the country. And I have every confidence they'll come up with something that's a first-class plan for pedestrian access, parking, and traffic circulation for this site.
All right. All right, I don't see any other speaker requests for him, so I'm going to close the public hearing at this point. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be taking action on the general plan amendment and the rezoning request separately. Before we do, are there any further questions or comments from commissioners on the general plan amendment specifically before I request a motion? Okay, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I motion that we approve Old Town SAP Amendment GPA 20-04, recommend approval to City Council.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of case GPA 20-04 to the City Council. Commissioners, please cast your vote. And it passes unanimously. Thank you, Commissioners. Next is the rezoning request for this property. I'm going to again ask any further questions or comments on the rezoning request before I request a motion. All right, seeing none, may I have a motion? Anybody want to offer up a motion?
Yes, I'll recommend approval of the City Council of case Z20-06, subject to the attached conditions in Exhibit 1.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve case Z20-06 to the City Council, subject to the attached conditions of approval in Exhibit 1. Commissioners, please cast your vote on the motion. Congratulations, that passes unanimously. All right, thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work on this project. This is very exciting, a lot of creative thinking, a lot of visionary thoughts around this, and can't wait to see it start to come to fruition. All right, we're going to move on to item 5R. I'm sorry, before I do that, I believe we have call to the public next. Isn't that correct? I'm going to get back to my agenda here. You know, if I can find my agenda. Yes, okay. Call the public on non-agenda items. Any members of the public want to comment on non-agenda items tonight? We have no public, so I'll assume that means no. All right, so we're going to next move on then to item 5R, reports from staff. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, a couple things tonight. Number one, just to note our next meeting. I can't promise as a robust of a meeting on the 5th as we have tonight. I think we have a few less cases on that night. But I will say, I think this was a very good meeting tonight. We had a lot of good projects to discuss. We had a lot of good comments from all the commissioners. I really respect and appreciate the perspective you all provide, so thank you for that. And then secondly, I'd like to congratulate Commissioner Otluski. We're going to miss you from the commission. We really appreciate your input and your participation and your contribution to the city of Peoria. So really appreciate it. We're going to miss you, especially in the summer months when you're going up to Flagstaff, aren't you? We'll definitely miss you. And hopefully, I think we finally broke 100 degrees here today, right? After setting records. So thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. Next is the next item is Planning and Zoning Commission updates and report of current events. Would any commissioners like to make any reports or updates, provide any reports or updates tonight? Well, I'm going to echo what Chris said. I've appreciated serving with you. I appreciate your thoughtfulness on these issues. You're always engaged. You ask terrific questions. I think that experience you bring, from the real estate side, I learned from the questions you ask. It's very insightful, and I certainly appreciate your sense of humor. I think you've been just a real pleasure to serve with, and thank you so much for what you've done for the city, for this commission, and wish you nothing but the best.
And if I get tired of the snow, I'll just move back to Peoria.
I don't think that's going to happen. But you're always welcome back. All right. Well, with that, seeing no further business, I call this meeting adjourned.